Hey guys, this is Coach Wilson. Hope you're having a great morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you are getting to your notes. Congratulations, we made it. It's day 13 of our notes for Unit 4. Super stoked for spring break myself. Even though I know we've been out of school, guys, I feel like this has been a stressful couple weeks leading up to spring break, just trying to make sure that you guys are getting all that you need, making sure that we're getting everything kind of squared away with how our online learning is being done. But overall, guys, I'm very proud of you. I want to say that first and foremost. It has been a very smooth transition for you guys especially. Maybe not as much so for my other class that I have, but the two honors classes that I have that are American 1, that are all juniors, you guys have done great, and I am very thankful for that. Just want to let you know that today's notes are very simple. We're going to talk about the Mexican-American War. We're going to go through it really quickly. Also, you guys have a assignment today, but it's a very easy assignment. All I'm asking you to do is play the Oregon Trail. I don't know if you guys have ever played it or not, but it's a game that I played growing up. It's a lot of fun. Kind of just change it up from what we've been doing, do something a little different. I generally do this in class, and you guys get to take the last 30 to 40 minutes and play with a partner. But highly suggest that you play it more than once, but you do have to play it once for your assignment and fill out the chart, but I've given you some explicit directions on that. So, you're going to write a bell ringer. My suggestion to you would be go play Oregon Trail and do the assignment first, and then come back and write your journal today, but you do it however you want to. These are our objectives for the day, and then what were the main causes of the Mexican-American War, and how did Manifest Destiny influence this decision to go to war? And we're just going to try to run through some of those things. So it's day 13. We are the Mexican-American War. Now, one of the first things that we're going to talk about is some of the lingering questions in our nation. So up until the 1830s, there was a lot of question of, was Texas ever going to be, brought into the Union? There was also the fact that we had claimed Texas at one point, and then we gave it up when we signed the Adams-Onis Treaty. And you guys, we've talked about that quite extensively. But in the 1840s, Mexico still saw Texas as kind of a part of its country. There were a lot of Mexicans who lived there. But the problem was there was also a lot of U.S. settlers who had actually crossed the border and set up there, and Mexico had actually been okay with that as long as you were Catholic, became Catholic, had no slaves, and as long as you paid Mexican taxes. So basically, as long as you kind of followed those guidelines, they didn't care if American settlers came over. The problem is there's a large amount of American settlers there now. Despite the decree of no slaves, many Southern slave owners took their slaves there anyways, basically trying to get away with it. It also, because of this, made it much more appealing to Southern politicians, especially those trying to expand slavery, to try to get Texas because, hey, maybe we can expand slavery, then, if we get Texas, what stops us from getting more land out west, or even maybe more land in the south? So you can see here, obviously, we know we got Texas eventually from Mexico, but here is just kind of a view of the land just to make sure you guys are keeping up with what years things are being taken. We are now in this part right here in 1845, and we are going to also talk about the part here in 1848 and the little piece here on the Gadsden Purchase. Stephen F. Austin was one of the biggest founders in Texas. He actually led a colonization of Texas in the 1820s, following basically having 300 families following him into the state. Now, the idea here was that he was given an impresario. An impresario, I've got one of it spelled on it, an impresario, is basically just a grant from the Mexican government. And it said that, you had the right to settle Mexican land, but you were responsible for recruiting a specific number of people, and you're responsible for the new settlers following all those decrees that they'd given. Because of what Stephen F. Austin does, farming flourishes and crops of sugar and cotton and among others start to flourish. Guys, it's very important that you understand that, because that's really what's going to cause problems as we get into the 1840s and 50s and we get closer to the Mexican-American War, and really only into the Civil War is this expansion of slavery into Texas. Now, here's a picture of Stephen F. Austin. Obviously, Austin, Texas is named after, and there's also the University Stephen F. Austin. Texas in the 1830s was a very active place. John Quincy Adams had been involved trying to get Texas. Andrew Jackson had tried. Many presidents wanted to get involved with Texas. Large amounts of Americans also lived in Mexico. It made sense. Texans wanted more autonomy from the Mexican government. It made sense to give them the freedom of being in the American government where they kind of had their own rights as a state, but could, still be a part of a country. So Stephen F. Austin actually goes to Mexico City. He had been heavily involved in Hispanic politics and Mexican politics during that time, but he ends up being arrested. And because of this, Mexico also denies his, kind of claim that he would like for Texas to be its own independent state government and have its own kind of independence. So in 1835, a war actually breaks out between the Texans and the Mexican army. Santa Anna was the president of Mexico, and he's actually going to lead the troops against the Texans. And we come to one of the most famous battles in history, the Alamo. And essentially, guys, there's a group of Texans. They held up at the old Spanish mission. They sent away their women and children. And essentially, 200 Texans took on 6,000 Mexican soldiers. Now, there is zero chance they were winning that battle. But because of it, it inspires Americans to send help to the Texans. It also inspired other Texans to get involved. And this famous slogan, "Remember the Alamo," becomes kind of this central theme of the war. In 1836, the Battle of San Jacinto, Texas declared Sam Houston to lead the charge against Mexico, and it was a decisive victory for the Texans, lasting only 18 minutes, in which 9 Texans died and 630 Mexicans died. So Mexico lost 630 soldiers in 18 minutes. That is incredibly fast. So just a very kind of important milestone here. It's also worth noting that Sam Houston had fought alongside Andrew Jackson in the war against the Native Americans and was very, very active in that time period. So let's see, that would have been 1812-ish. So you're talking about 23 years later. So I mean, even if he was a young man, he's in his 50s now, and he's still leading armies. A very, very impressive feat there from Mr. Houston. But another man in which Texas gives a city's name to in Houston, Texas. Here's a picture of the Alamo in 1854 that was drawn. Then that's a scene you can watch if you're taking notes from the actual Prezi itself. Texas goes from a republic to a state. So basically in 1836, we annex Texas. It becomes a part of the United States. But it doesn't actually get brought into the Union as a state until 1845. And one of the biggest reasons was slavery. Is the idea of the Missouri Compromise, if you remember, was that all the states in the middle, there where the Louisiana Territory was, and there to the basically right of the Adams-Onis Treaty on a map, all those areas were going to be slave if it was above the 3630 or below the 3630 line, and free if it was above the 3630 line. Well, now you've got new land that wasn't a part of that. So does it fall under that legislation? And that was the big argument there for 9 years. Now, bigger than that is Mexico still controls California, Arizona, New Mexico, all those territories. And President Polk, when he comes to office in the 1840s, he wants California from Mexico. He sees it as this idea of realizing our manifest destiny. And so he actually sends one of his generals, Zachary Taylor, to the Rio Grande River, which is right there on the border of Texas, and tries to provoke the Mexican army. Because if he could get the Mexican army to attack American soldiers, then it gave him more clout or power, whatever you want to say, to go to Congress and say, hey, we need to go attack Mexico and we need to fight back because they're attacking our troops, even though really Polk was the one who was starting it. The war comes to be known as Polk's War. Congress declares war on Mexico after a group of soldiers get attacked, just like what he wanted. Polk calls for volunteers. He needed 50,000 and he got 73,000. So still no draft. The first time we'll really see a draft is going to come during the Civil War. But the first battle was Palo Alto, where Taylor defeated Mexican forces days before we even signed the Declaration of War. So the fight's already started prior to Congress ever approving anything. The big thing here is that President Polk wanted to attack in 3 ways. He wanted to go after Santa Fe, then California, then Mexico City. And what he thought is that he could take as far as what is the capital of now present-day Mexico. And guys, it is incredible the amount of land that we took in a short matter of time from Mexico. Now, Santa Fe was attacked by Kearney. That's going to be there in New Mexico. Taylor's going to head to actual Mexico, and then John C. Fremont is going to take charge in California. Okay, and he'll be aided by Kearney after Santa Fe is secured. That was the plan. Now, here you can actually see the map of kind of the forces. So here's Kearney. Kearney's going to break off, and he's going to attack through Arizona, New Mexico, coming this side of California. Fremont's going to attack up in San Francisco's area, and basically they'd kind of sandwich the Mexican forces that were here. And then down in this area, you would have, Zachary Taylor's forces would actually attack down in the south. Okay, and my map's cut off there. I'll have to see if I can get a better picture on there next time. But anyways, the treaty that was signed was called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that ended the war. It was a very short war in terms of what, I guess 3 years is really not that short. But in February of 1848, Mexico ceded 500,000 square miles of land. That means they gave up all that land. And the Rio Grande was established as the border of Texas. And in our eyes, this was the dream of Manifest Destiny realized, that we had secured all the way to the Pacific Ocean. At least all of that part of our land was connected in the middle. Now, there was also the issue there along kind of that Adams-Onis Treaty line is the best way to say it. But there's kind of this idea of, okay, all these new territories that we just added, what is the answer to that? So you've got Oregon's now part of our country by this time, Washington, which is coming, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado. Like, you've got all these places that eventually states are going to form. What are we going to do with that territory? The Wilmot Proviso was brought to Congress, and that proposed that any new territory from Mexico could not have slavery or involuntary servitude. You can imagine Southerners were outraged at the Wilmot Proviso. This is something you need to remember, because this is kind of one of those things coming down the pipe for the Civil War as kind of aggravating Southerners, making them more wanting to get away from the North. Now, the Gadsden Purchase was another thing that we need to talk about after the peace treaty. Essentially, if you go back to that map, and we're going to go back all the way to, let's see, it's coming. Right here. So this right here, this little brown area, this is the Gadsden Purchase. Essentially, we paid a significant amount of money for that piece of land. And the reason we wanted it is because that was where we were going to run the railroad through, because it was too mountainous to areas above it. And we spent $10 million to get that little portion of land, which finalized our border, but was more so that we could run the railroad through that portion of Arizona and New Mexico. That's why we spent all that money. So right down in here. So here's the Missouri Compromise line. In Southerners' eyes, this line just extended on out to the coast of California. The problem is all these blue states up here, and even some of these states expanding in this area, they don't see it that way. Now, it's important to note all these states don't exist yet. Okay, they're just territories at that point. So gold's discovered in California at Sutter's Mill. Brings nearly 300,000 people there. Also brings the 49ers. Okay, so the miners are going to rush, and this is going to kind of start spreading that westward settlement, getting people out west. You're going to see tons of people flock there. The problem is there's not a lot of gold, and it turns into kind of a bad show. So here's your 3 vocabulary words. Pretty simple. Make sure you guys are getting those. Guys, do not forget you have vocabulary, you have journal, and you have this assignment today. All that's coming due, not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after when you come back from spring break. That will be the day of your test. That will be the day your vocab and journal is due. If you are behind on that stuff, guys, please get that done. If you have not been taking notes and you've just been answering the questions, guys, I'm telling you, you need to have the notes and you need to be listening to the lectures. Granted, if you haven't been listening to lectures, you hadn't heard this. But anyways, guys, I love you. I hope you have a great spring break. I miss you guys. I'm excited about seeing you in the future. And hopefully we'll see you guys soon, and we'll have all this mess put behind us. Do not worry about this assignment, okay? Don't do that, and don't worry about any of this, okay? Have a great weekend and a great week off, guys. See you soon.